Alright, welcome back to the RootBSD channel. Today we are going to do part 3 of the OpenBSD frequently asked questions, which is basically the OpenBSD handbook or the OpenBSD manual for beginners. And and after that you are expected to dig into the man pages for all your needs. So just real quick, customary neofetch. There we go. We're running OpenBSD 7.0 current on AMD 64, and I am using kernel revision 125. Okay. So on to. There we go. And the music you are listening to is Lo-Fi Christmas Songs by Stomp's Playlist. Copyright-free lo-fi music. If you guys have YouTube channels, it's a great resource. Alright. And also, by request of the gentleman that works on the OpenBSD website, I am showcasing the dark mode for the new OpenBSD. Or I'm sorry, he has a new dark mode. So if you have dark mode set in your web browser, it'll set up like this. All right. So let's go to the frequently asked questions. All right. And today we are in the installation guide. Okay. So, overview of the installation procedure. The OpenBSD installer uses a special RAM disk kernel, bsd.rd, that spawns a live environment running entirely in memory. So yes, the BSD RAM kernel is great for upgrades, and also great if you need to do any kind of system recovery or system repair or something went wrong. It contains the install script and a small number of utilities needed to perform a complete installation. These utilities can also be useful for disaster recovery. The RAM disk kernel can be booted from a number of different sources: CD, DVD, USB drive, an existing partition, over a network, PXE or other network boot options, or a floppy disk. Not every platform supports all of these options. If you have a running OpenBSD system, BSD-RD is all you need to reinstall or upgrade to a newer version. To do so, download and verify the new BSD.RD, place it on an existing file system, and boot from it. The general method of booting BSD.RD is to change your boot kernel from BSD to BSD-RD through whatever means used on your platform. So there's an example right there. And yes, if you before it boots, you can just type it in BSD.RD to boot into the RAM disk kernel. But I use sysupgrade. Sysupgrade is a great tool. This will boot into the kernel named BSD-RD from the first partition of the first recognized hard disk. If you need to specify a different drive or partition, just prefix the kernel name with its location. The following example would boot from the fourth partition from the second hard drive. So right there you can boot HD1D :/BSD.RD. So if you need to specify a different drive, so if you're like, let's say if you have multiple BSD installations, OpenBSD installations, it's a good option. So OpenBSD bootloaders are documented in the architecture-specific boot man pages. Right here. Right here. See if we can make it a little bigger. There we go. And definitely, if you want to check that out in your free time. Alright. So we can make it just, yeah, there we go. Alright. The pre-installation checklist. Before you start, you should have some idea of what you want to end up with. A few things worth considering beforehand: the machine name, the hardware installed and available. Now verify compatibility with your hardware. You may want to consult the platform-specific installation notes, especially if you're using one of the non-x86 architectures. They contain detailed instructions and any possible caveats. Yeah, you definitely, if you guys want to install OpenBSD to a Raspberry Pi or some kind of an ARM board, or RISC, we have this new option now, the RISC-V 64 architecture, or SPARC. You got to look up, there's specific installations instructions, like, here, I'll just show you one right now. So here's the installation notes for OpenBSD RISC-V 64. So, and it'll tell you what machines that are compatible with RISC-V. The Microsemi Polar 5 SoC Icicle Kit, or the Sci-Fi High-5 Unmatched. Man, I really want one of those. I looked it up. They're out of stock until next year. So those things go really fast. I'm gonna give it a couple years, and maybe eventually they'll be easier to obtain. But I'd love to have the Sci-Fi desktop machine. If wireless internet is your only option, does your card require additional firmware? If so, you'll need to download it manually to a USB drive or something similar, and then use FW Update to enable it after OpenBSD is installed. And definitely, if you ever find yourself in that situation, check out my installing firmware like a boss video, and I'll put a link in the description. So you gotta consider the install method to be used, the desired disk layout. Does existing data need to be saved elsewhere? Will OpenBSD coexist on this system with another OS? If so, how will each system be booted? Will you need to install a boot manager? I have another video about how to dual boot OpenBSD and GNU/Linux like a boss. And I go through exactly how to do it with Grub. But you can also use refind. I think that's how you say it. rfind. Okay. And yeah, I think those are the only other two options. You definitely you want to do that if you're going to be dual booting Linux and FreeBSD and NetBSD and OpenBSD. If you're going to have a big group, I would recommend probably just using either Grub or Refind. Will the entire disk be used for OpenBSD, or do you want to keep an existing partition OS, space for a future one? So yeah, if you're going to start partitioning out your hard drive, if you plan on multi-booting, definitely leave some room in there. It's probably always best to have OpenBSD as at the end or on a separate drive, and have like Linux or Windows in the beginning. So I always recommend that. Will the entire disk be used for OpenBSD? Oh wait, I already read that. How do you sorry? How do you wish to sub-partition the OpenBSD part of your disk? Do you want disk encryption? And I've done on my unboxing video, I showed you guys how to do full disk encryption, and here's a guide right here. And this would be part of the This would be part of disk and partition. So we're not there yet. This is part of disk setup. We'll get to this later down the line. Network settings. If not using DHCP, the domain name and the DNS settings, the IP address and subnet mask for each network integrated controller, and the gateway address. Okay, so if you're not going to be using a DHCP, you got to consider all those things. And if you probably already know what you're doing anyways. Downloading OpenBSD. The following installation images are available. The disk image can be written to a USB drive or a similar device. This includes the file sets. Now, the file sets are all the components of the operating system broken up into pieces. So in case, like, for example, here, let's go here. Like, let's go to AMD 64. Oh, I'm installing. So I want this one. Mirror sites. There we go. Alright, so let's say what you would probably want to usually do is you're going to want to do the .img file for USB. I think the .iso is only for CD or DVD. And also you'll see that let's see right here. You'll see that you'll have all these different .tgz files like xbase, xfont, xserv, game. You got BSD, bsd.mp. So all that stuff's broken up in case, like, let's say you don't want the multiprocessor kernel, you just want the single processor kernel, or you don't want the games included. You can choose to not include those, or you can choose to install it without X if it's just going to be on a headless server. So that's what the file sets are. Keeps forgetting where I was at. Alright, so definitely, yeah, there's also alternative mirror sites. You can check out each one, maybe get one that's closest to you, or just directly from the main OpenBSD cloud network. Alright, images. Okay, so an SHA-256 file containing checksums can be found in the same directory as the installation files. You can confirm that none of the downloaded files were mingled in transit using the SHA-256 command. So there's the command right there on how to check it. Or if you're using an OS with GNU core utils, you can, like let's say you're using a Linux, you can use the program SHA-256 sum. Okay. However, this only checks for accidental corruption. You can use signify and the SHA-256.sig file to cryptographically verify the download image using signify. Now, signify is available on Arch Linux and Ubuntu, and if it is not available on your distro, I found this for you guys here on GitHub. This is probably the most up-to-date one. They had a commit 12 days ago, but I'll put a link in the description. This is a portable build of Signify, so if you need to verify your OpenBSD install image, you can do it here. And it has all the information you need to build it from source. Not very complicated. I think it's just a make command. Yeah, right there. Make extra flags. Yeah, super simple. And I'll tell you the dependencies. You just need GNU make, a C compiler, and so it looks like you need libbsd. And it says what you all the instructions are here, so it's pretty simple. But most like Debian and Arch Linux have app install signify OpenBSD or Arch Linux pacman -s signify. It'll be the same on Manjaro. All right, and if you guys are planning on dual booting, check out my dual boot video. I show you how to do it on Grub. And also, I want to also add that on the dual boot video, I didn't cover the need to generate what is it called, UUIDs. You need to generate UUIDs for your OpenBSD install. We'll get to that because we're going to cover multi-booting. Note that the Signify package on other operating systems might not include the required public key, or it may be installed in another location. So yeah, you have to get the public key. Let's see what... There's the public key. Okay, you need that. Stop going to the beginning of the page. Alright. The install70 ISO and install70.image images do not contain a SHA-256.sig file, so the installer will complain that it can't check the signature of the included sets. This is because it would make no sense for the installer to verify them. If someone were to make a rogue installation image, they could certainly change the installer to say that the files were legitimate. If the image's signature has been verified beforehand, it is safe to answer yes at that prompt. Okay? Creating install media, flash drives. A bootable USB flash drive can be created by attaching the target device and copying over the image with DD. Using OpenBSD, assuming the device was recognized as SD6, you would do DD if equals install 70.image of equals dev r. So yeah, you do the raw device in OpenBSD if you're writing an image. And I'm sure you guys know how to do this in Linux. If you're doing this in Microsoft Windows, I think you would probably just want to use something like Rufus. Note the raw I/O device is used, RSD6C rather than SD6C. That's the raw character device. Details of this will vary on other platforms. The GNU version of DD will require byte size equals 1 megabyte. Note the capital M instead. Okay? If you're using a different OS, be sure to select the appropriate device name, like dev SDX on Linux, or dev R diskx on Mac OS, for example. I've never used Mac OS, so I couldn't tell you guys how. I'm pretty sure it's very similar to Linux commands. I think they have their own version of DD. Alright. You can create a bootable CD-ROM on OpenBSD by using CD.io. So this would be, I guess this would be handy if you got some old machine that doesn't have any USB drives. So you use CD.io, tau, CD.iso. Actually, yeah, I guess I guess you wouldn't use. You'd use this CD70 ISO. I guess I'm wrong. The install 70.iso is not for CDs. You want to use CD70.iso. I'm not sure why they keep around the .iso for install 70. I'm sure there's a reason. But I know that they switched over to the .img for the 7.0 release. Okay, performing a simple... I have done plenty of install videos already on the channel, so I'm not going to bore you with another installation. It's really straightforward. If you need instructions on booting your preferred media, check the relevant platform page of your machine. The installer is designed to install OpenBSD in a very usable default configuration with a minimum of user intervention. In fact, you can often just hit enter to get a good OpenBSD. Yeah, OpenBSD installs are basically like for dummies. A monkey can install OpenBSD. Oh man, that's some good apple cider. Moving the rest of your hands to the rest of your keyboard only to enter the root password. After D message is shown, you'll see the first installer questions. You want to install, upgrade, auto install, or do you want to drop into a shell? You would only drop into a shell really if you're repairing something or need to mount something, or if you're setting up full disk encryption. So these are the file sets. A complete OpenBSD installation is broken up into a number of file sets. You got the BSD, BSD.mp, BSD.rd, base70.tgz. So let me start that over. BSD is the kernel that's required. BSD.mp is the multiprocessor kernel, only used on some platforms. BSD.rd is the RAM disk kernel. We talked about that earlier. Base70.tgz, that's the base system that is required. So two of those things are required. So if you want like just the most ridiculously bare bones system you could think of, you could just install BSD and base, and that's it, and have nothing else. I mean, I don't know how hardcore you want to go, but just run from console mode, and I mean that might actually be fun. The only thing is I never could get lines to display correctly in console mode. They display as question marks. So in the comments, if you know how to fix that question mark thing in console mode, let me know. I'd love to figure that out. And you got comp 70.tgz, that's the compiler collection, headers and libraries. That's basically the equivalent of build essentials in Ubuntu, or God, I forget what it's called in Arch Linux. I used to know what it was called. I don't know. It's your compiler tool chains, headers and libraries. Man 70, that's the manual pages. Definitely you want the man pages. Don't skimp on the man pages. Game 70 is the text-based games. Now, I don't really ever play the text-based games, but what's really cool on there is Fortune, because you can use Fortune to set up your Duaz insults. So Duaz can curse you out if you get your password wrong. And I have a video about that. Check out my Duaz insults video. And then, of course, you got Xenokara. Xenokara, OpenBSD maintains a fork of the Xorg server, or X11, called Xenokara. And it's a security-hardened fork. X runs rootless, and it uses privilege separation code, or what I call privsep. So if you ever hear me say privsep, that means privilege separation. So you have Xbase, Xfont, Xserver, and Xshare. That's the X11 man pages. So X11 is part of, Xenokara or X11 is part of the OpenBSD operating system. It is compiled with it. It is developed with it. So I think it's the only operating system that I know of that's UNIX-like that includes X by default. Everything else you have to install X. Now, I mean, people will say, well, no, that's not true. What about Ubuntu and stuff? Well, those are distributions that people bundle together. Because you have to have the Linux kernel and the whatever. Okay. I'm sure you get what I'm saying. At least it's the only BSD that includes X by default, I think. I've never actually used NetBSD, so if I need to check on that. New users are recommended to install all of them. Yes, I recommend to install all of them. The only one you might want to just leave behind is the game one if you're not interested in the text-based games. They said they keep them in there for the old grumpy Unix beards, the ones that have been doing this for 30 years. Some libraries from Xbase70.tgz like FreeType or FontConfig can be used outside of X by programs that manipulate text or graphics. Such programs will usually need fonts, either from Xfont70.tgz or font packages. For sake of simplicity, developers decided against maintaining a minimal Xbase70.tgz set that would allow most non-X ports to run. Adding a file set after install. If you choose to skip some file sets at install time, you might realize later that you really do need them after all. Simply just boot back into BSD RAM disk from your root file system and choose Upgrade. And when you get the list of file sets, select the ones you need. And also, you can also boot into the BSD RAM disk if you want to upgrade from if you're running the stable branch or the release branch, you can upgrade to current, which is a more is a development branch, and you get more up-to-date packages, and you can update more frequently. The only caveat with running current is you lose a little bit of stability, and it's more along the lines of if you have a lot of system configs, sometimes you gotta go through a process called sysmerge, to where you kind of review all the changes to the configs and stuff like that. So what I generally use is I use sysupgrade. I love sysupgrade. I really don't even boot into the RAM disk kernel ever. I rarely have to. Oh, but one thing I want to tell you though is if you ever need to get into the RAM disk kernel because you mess something up and you got to edit a config, you only got ed. So you have to set. I think you have to set a certain environment variable to get VI and MG working. Okay. Disk partitioning. OpenBSD can be installed in as little as 512 megabytes, but using a device that small is something for advanced users. Until you have some experience, 8 gigabytes or more disk space is recommended. Unlike some other operating systems, OpenBSD encourages users to split their disks into a number of partitions, rather than just one or two large ones. Some of the reasons for doing so are security. Some of OpenBSD's default security features rely on file system mount options, such as no SUID, no dev, no exec, or WX allowed. Yeah, so on this file system, I set up just one large root partition, and now in hindsight, I realized that it's good because you now in order to run video games like using a signify, I have to set WX allowed, where in the past or on a traditional install that has all the slices, the WX allowed would just be in the user local slice. So it's actually more secure to have the slices. But they're kind of a pain in the neck when you're dealing with like running a FSCK. Takes a little longer, file system check, and stuff like that. But it's recommended to use the slices. Stability. A user or a misbehaved program could fill up a file system with garbage if they have write permission for it. Your critical programs, which hopefully run on a different file system, do not get interrupted. File system check. You can mount partitions that you never or rarely need to write to as read-only most of the time, which will eliminate the need for file system check after a crash or power interruption. That's interesting. I've never thought about doing. I might play around with that. That I can mount. I can set some of my partitions to read only, so I can eliminate the need for a file system check after a crash or power. Hey, that's good to know. Hey, see, I'm learning something new by doing this. This is partly why I'm doing this, so I can learn something new and you can learn something new. Because some of us we get kind of lazy and we never read the documentation or we just skip over. I'm really bad about I'll skim read over documentation just looking for the quickest solution of whatever problem I'm having. And I'll overlook a lot of useful information. You never just actually. So it's good to just slow down and read the documentation. You'll learn new things. And I've read this before. I guess I've never even noticed that. That's pretty cool. So I think when I redo this desktop installation, I'm gonna go back to using slices, and I can play around with some of that stuff. The installer will create a partitioning plan based on the size of your hard disk. While this will not be a perfect layout for all people, it provides a good starting point for figuring out what you need. Read about disk labels defaults for automatic disk allocation and the higher man page, that's hierarchy, before making decisions about custom partitioning schemes. Since some packages need to be started from a WX allowed file system, that would be signify needs it, because mono needs it. It's mono that needs a WX allowed. And I believe the Dolphin GameCube emulator needs it, but Firefox and Chrome can run with WX allowed turned off. If you want a little bit more secure Chrome or Firefox running, you can disable WX allowed. You just edit it out of your FS tab, And then you can also disable just-in-time or JITs. So that's, you know, Theodorat said that WXRX violating JITs are a big security problem for home users using their web browser. Very small partitions can become troublesome when you need to upgrade. A home partition can be nice. New version of the OS, leave your home partition untouched. Wipe and reload everything else. You may want to create an alt root partition for backing up your root file system. A system exposed to the internet should have a separate var, maybe even a separate var log. Compiling some ports from source can take huge amount of space in your user intent partitions. Now, what you can do is you can resize partitions. I generally recommend that. Just check your partition sizes. Sometimes, if you're going to have a lot of packages, you want to try all the packages and all the ports, or you're going to be compiling from ports. Probably good to just bump up that user. It's the user local in the user slices. You can bump them up a couple gigs just to give that extra room. Because some people have talked about in the past of running out of room trying to compile ports. And a quick tip, if that ever happens to you, you can just symlink your user ports to your home directory. Sending your dmessage after the install. After a successful install, look at the output of the dmessage command and see if anything stands out. If a device shows up as not configured, this means that it is not currently supported by the kernel. This may be improved in the future by sending the dmessage. A quote from user source etc. root.mail. If you wish to ensure that your OpenBSD runs better on your machines, please do us a favor. After you have the mail system configured, of course, and type something like this. You know, there's that command, Sony Vio 505R laptop APM works okay, so that we can see what kind of configuration people are running. As shown, including a bit of information about your machine in the subject or the body can help us even further. You will use this information to improve device driver support in future releases. Please do this using the supply generic kernel, not for a custom compiled kernel, unless you are able to boot the generic kernel. If you have a multiprocessor machine, dmessage results of both generic MP and generic kernels are appreciated. The device driver information we get from this helps us fix existing drivers. So you guys complain about OpenBSD not having good hardware support? Install it on your hardware and then send the dmessage over to the OpenBSD guys, you know, and then, or you know, like install it or boot it from a USB drive. So you can actually install directly to a USB drive, even though it's really slow. If you don't want to overwrite what you got going on. Alternatively, you can save your dmessage output to a text file and send us its contents, just using that command. Please configure your email client to use plain text. In particular, do not use HTML formatting or forced line breaks. Put the dmessage in the body of the mail, not as an attachment. Yeah, those guys, they don't want to click on weird attachments, you know. Customizing the install process. The site70.tgz file set. The OpenBSD install and upgrade scripts allow the selection of a user-created set called site70.tgz. Unlike, I think that stands for tar gzip. Unlike the official file sets, this is a tar archive rooted in root and untarred with the -xzphf options. It is installed last, so it can be used to complement and modify the files from a default install. Furthermore, it is possible to use hostname-dependent sets named site70 hostname -s.tgz. Note, if you intend to provide sets over HTTPS, place site70.tgz in your source directory and include it in your index.txt. This will be an option at install time. The install.site and the install.site scripts. If the site70.tgz file set contains an executable file, install.site, the installer runs it with changeroot or chroot based at the freshly installed system's root. Similarly, the upgrade script runs an upgrade.site. The latter can be placed in the system's root directory before rebooting from the upgrade. I've never messed around with this kind of stuff before. So if this is something that might interest you, maybe we'll get into this when we compile the system from source. Example usage: set the system time, do an immediate backup archive of the new system before you expose it to the rest of the world, or have a set of arbitrary commands you run after the first boot. This will happen if the install.site is used to append any such command to an rc.firsttime file. Appending this file is necessary since the installer itself may write to this file. At boot time, rc.firsttime is executed once and then deleted. And I also believe it's also after an upgrade, it runs that too, and sysmerge. Multi-booting. Okay, so we're almost to the end here. Multi-booting is having several operating systems on one computer, with some means of selecting which OS is to boot. You may want to familiarize yourself with the OpenBSD boot process before you start. A brief introduction to fdisk is in the section on using OpenBSD's fdisk. Fdisk is pretty simple. You know, there's a... I'm trying to remember if if I have this set up here. No, that's not it. I had a command for screen key. I just can't remember what it was. Backspace. Oh yeah, okay. So with fdisk, what is going on? Oh, yeah. I don't want to use Google. Go away, Google. It just went to Google. That's funny. That's why I don't really like using this screen key thing. Alright. See if I can just have it capture up here. Alright. So PG, when you drop into fdisk, PG will show you the partitions and show you their size in gigabytes, okay? And then just type question mark. Question mark will give you all the different options you can use in fdisk. The OpenBSD fdisk is really simple and really easy to use, okay? It's not complicated at all. Alright. I think that one executes. Alright, so if you are adding OpenBSD to an existing system, you will probably need to create You'll probably need to create some free space before installing OpenBSD. In addition to your system's existing native tools, gparted may be useful for deleting or resizing partitions. Preferably use one of the 4 primary MBR partitions for booting OpenBSD. Extended partitions may not work. refind is reported to usually work. Grub is reported to usually fail. That's not true, because I figured out a way to install OpenBSD from Grub, super simple, using chain loading and using the boot x64.efi. So I'll link in the description. Check out my how to dual boot GNU Linux and OpenBSD from Grub like a boss. That's right. Let me drink some of this cider. Okay. Windows. I don't use Windows. I haven't used Windows in about 5 years. I do have a Windows install that a friend set up for me, that just so my kids can play Roblox. That's it, and it's on another computer. And I hardly ever touch that thing, unless I'm just like helping them like look up a Roblox game or Roblox whatever. You know, they love that stuff. So the boot configuration data BCD store allows multiple versions of Windows to be booted through BCD edit. A good introduction can be found in this article. If you want a GUI alternative, you may try Easy BCD. You will need to copy your OpenBSD install's partition boot record PBR. You can copy it to a file using a process similar to, there you go, DD. So I'm not going to read all this out, but yeah, if you guys, if you want to multi-boot Windows and OpenBSD, I guess, you know, maybe if you want to do it for gaming, or you got to use something for work, definitely it's an option. And also sometimes, you know, if you can fit it into your laptop or your desktop, honestly, I think it's better just to have multiple hard disk drives. Like in my laptop, I have my OpenBSD main daily driver install on an SSD that's in the DVD drive bay, because I don't really use DVDs anymore. And then the old hard drive, I have Linux on there and a testing partition for OpenBSD or whatever, if I just want to test something out or try something bare metal. Because I'm not a big VM user. I'm not crazy about VMs. But the only thing I'm probably going to want to use a VM for is I want to try out Plan 9. I have played with it a little bit, but I want to really get into it. Because I don't know why, it's just fascinating to me, Plan 9 Unix. So definitely we'll be doing some Plan 9 content eventually. Probably not this year, probably sometime next year. and other stuff. So yeah, that's all. I hope you learned something today. I learned something today about why we need to use the slices and not just a big root partition folder. There are security benefits. So yeah, definitely go ahead and install OpenBSD. Install it on a VM or on an old computer if you got one lying around. If you're not, ready to jump into it yet, or maybe your computer might not necessarily support it very well. Maybe if you have like a newer kind of gaming computer with like an NVIDIA card, probably not. But definitely, I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope you got something. All right, bye.